What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Believe it or not, it has been 8 years since the release of the first Moana film, which means it is finally time to talk about the sequel, Moana 2. Directed by David G. Derrick Jr., Jason Hand, and Dana Ledoux Miller, this film once again stars people like Auli'i, Cravalho, Dwayne Johnson, Alan Tudyk, Temuera Morrison, and some new faces in the mix like Rose Matafeo, David Fain, and many more. So I never got around to covering the first Moana film, as it's a film that came out before I started my channel, just a couple of years shy. It's a film that I was hoping to revisit before doing this video here to give you guys a little bit of a retrospective review, but I've been catching up on some newer releases that have been coming out, so I didn't get around to it. But at some point I'd still like to do a dedicated video to that first Moana film, as I think it's one of my favorite films in the modern day of Disney movies. Without a doubt, a standout, and in a world where people love Frozen, I've always preferred something like Moana way more. I love the music in that movie, I love the look of it, and I love the journey. I think it's a very beautiful looking film with a very nice message at the center of it all, with some really likable characters and a lot of fun to be had, some great humor as well. So when I heard we were finally going to be getting Moana 2, I was very excited, and amidst all this going on, we've also been getting some leaked screen images that have been coming out of the upcoming live action Moana that I do not think is necessary whatsoever, and also stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, which almost makes it even less necessary, but that's a video for another time. But today we're going to be talking about the sequel, like I mentioned before. It's coming 8 years after the release of the first film. It's a film that a lot of people have been incredibly excited for, but it's one of those things where you never know how a sequel is going to land all this time later. But it is nice that you have returning cast members, of course, in Auli'i Cravalho, who plays the character of Moana once again in this film, and Dwayne Johnson returning as the character of Maui. And I really enjoy that first film for its simplicity and the fact that you don't have an abundance of characters in the mix, and a lot of the supporting cast is really at the beginning and the end of that film, with majority of that journey being about Moana and Maui, and this young girl with this ambition helping this demigod who's kind of lost his way, and the two of them kind of working together to save the world in a way. So at the start of this film, Moana has a new kind of role in her society and her people. They look at her with a lot more respect. She's been given a new title, and it's now been bestowed upon her as being a wayfinder for her people to discover more people out there in the oceans. That's when we learn that there is a god out there who has actually disrupted the ability for any people to come together in the ocean, and now it's up to Moana to go out and seek out an island that's been hidden by this god and try to uncover it so that the people of the ocean can reconnect once again, and so that she doesn't have to deal with the extinction of her people. Along the way, she ends up running into people like Maui once again, and she has her friends come along with her, a new group of characters known as Loto, Mani, and Kili, who end up going on this adventure to try to stop this god's curse, to try to, again, connect humanity across the oceans. That is the general premise of this film. I won't say much more, because going into it, I didn't know abundance what this movie was going to be about either. I think the trailers have done a pretty good job of not giving you too much information and giving you just enough to know you're walking into a Moana sequel, and that Moana is going to hit the ocean once again and run into Maui. What I can start this review off by saying is that, similar to the original film and similar to a lot of Disney films in the modern day, the animation is stunning. There are portions of this film that were absolutely beautiful to see on an IMAX screen, which was the screening that I got to see it in tonight. Visually, this film is compelling from beginning to end, and I just completely was captivated on it alone. If I had watched this film with no sound, I would still have been absolutely captivated by how beautiful this film looks. With that said, though, I do have my gripes. There are issues I have with this film, because I think it's important to know, like a lot of sequels, that this film does not soar to the same heights as the original Moana film, and I have a couple of reasons why. But before we get into my gripes, I do want to continue to praise the film, as I think the voice cast here does a great job once again. Auli'i Cravalho, who plays the character Moana, comes back to give us a very heartfelt performance once again, not only in her vocal performances in the musical numbers, but also in just the way that she's able to convey this character over the course of the film. She's able to continue to show that ambition as a character, but now that she's a little bit older, there is a little bit of that fear that tends to kind of trickle into us once we become a little bit more aware of how the world works, how things around us are kind of working, the reality of danger. In the first film, she's ambitious, she's not afraid of anything, she's willing to go out there and do everything and anything she can because she loves the idea of adventuring. She plays that young, ambitious character so well. And in this film, we see her in a different place. There's more responsibility on her shoulders, and I think Auli'i Cravalho does a great job of bringing this character to life once again in a little bit of a different phase in her life. And it was great once again to see Dwayne Johnson as Maui. In a lot of ways, he feels like he's just doing the things that really worked as Maui in the first film, but if you enjoy the character of Maui, there's more Maui to be seen here, and I think that Dwayne Johnson did a good job of coming back and playing this role. And across the board, in terms of all the supporting cast members as well, I think the voice cast is really strong here. And touching on the voice cast part of things, of course, you gotta lean into the music, because the music is a huge part of what people love about the first Moana film, me included. And in the case of this film, I think the music is once again really strong here. You have the musical score here being incredibly strong throughout the entirety of the film, oftentimes giving us new music as you would come to expect in a sequel, but also having tons of the reprised motifs from the first film appearing throughout the course of the film to give you that connection to the first film that you want. In terms of the musical numbers here as well, there were quite a few that I actually really enjoyed, a few that I was singing in my head on the way home, and specifically a big song that's sung near the beginning of the film and is reprised in the latter part of the film, similar to what they did with the first film, that definitely tugs on the heartstrings and gets you into the overall themes of what this film is all about. Like that first film though, there are a couple of songs in the mix that I think some people will really enjoy but aren't necessarily the greatest. There's definitely that Lin-Manuel Miranda kind of approach to songwriting that we've seen in a lot of Disney films in recent years, and a lot of them were enjoyable. There's a handful of them that I can't necessarily see myself clamoring to revisit, but maybe over the course of time with some revisits, I'll find myself enjoying those songs a little bit more. But there were about 3 or 4 songs throughout the course of the film that I actually really enjoyed, some of which not only because they were great on a vocal level and had that kind of catchy element to them, but also because visually what was following them along on a visual level was really, really nice. And a lot of times they were able to kind of play into the themes of the movies and push the story forward, which is what you want in any sort of musical numbers. When it comes down to the vocal performances there, I thought it was great. The musical composition I thought was great as well. And even in the songs that I didn't necessarily find myself in love with, I was still able to be impressed by how well put together they actually are. With all that said though, I think the thing that we all want to see when it comes down to a Moana sequel is its narrative. And the question here is it a sequel that lives up to the first one? In a lot of ways, I think it does. I think it's a sequel that definitely plays on the themes of the original films, plays on the strengths of the original film, and definitely elevates certain moments. With that said though, I unfortunately felt that Moana 2 kind of fell off narratively across the board, as I felt like it felt a little bit more messy narratively, and at times I didn't really fully know what the film was trying to be. I told you the premise about Moana going off to the ocean. She reunites with Maui. They're trying to stop this god's curse of this island they're trying to look for so they can reconnect people of the ocean. There are 3 new side characters that are thrown into the mix, the characters of Loto, Mani, and Kelly, and the 3 of them are fun, enjoyable characters in the mix. I think there are great, charming, and endearing moments that all of them have, some funny moments as well that they definitely add to the movie, but unfortunately they are also part of the problem for me, as I think that there are quite a few side characters and random interesting characters that are introduced in the film that ultimately don't have an abundance to do. There's also another character in the mix here who's kind of a villain in the film to some degree. I won't say too much about her character that has to do with bats, and I thought she was a pretty interesting character, but also a character that's fairly underutilized. And so what you kind of had is this film that has a lot of characters that I don't necessarily know they fully did enough with. And when you look at the first film, part of what made that film work is a simple tale of a young girl who's ambitious and going out to the sea to try to do what she can to kind of help her family and also kind of live out her own dreams, who runs into a demigod who is kind of down on his luck, and she kind of helps kind of bolster him up. And it's really about the 2 of them and that, you know, funny animal companion in the mix. And I think that simplicity really worked for the first Moana, whereas in the case of Moana 2, I think having a bunch of side characters in the mix that all have their moments that definitely put a smile on my face or made me laugh or made me kind of charmed to the character, I just think that maybe at times there was too many of them that they didn't really have their time to shine enough, where it felt like a little bit of a fluff. This is one of those movies where you got to the end, you get to the big final showdown, and you're like, oh my god, we're already here. It felt like it breezed by. On one hand, that's kind of a testament to how well paced this film was, as it does not feel like it's a film that drags. It's not a film that keeps you there like, oh, when is this gonna end? I actually was quite surprised that we were at the end by the time we were at the end. So the movie does move in a lot of ways and keeps it entertaining and flowing with some cool action sequences and a lot of visual spectacle and some fun musical numbers along the way. But I couldn't help but feel like in the middle chunk of the film, there just wasn't enough meat on the bone narratively for me to really care about all the characters and all the things that were going on here. With that said though, by the time we get to the end of the film though, I think those pieces do come together, and despite the fact that I wish there was a little bit more meat on the bone earlier in the film, I think that the overall themes of the film come together really nicely, as ultimately this is a film about unity. In a world where we have a lot of individuals in higher power positions or the media and different things like that that do divide humanity across the board, and I think that whatever your political opinions on life are, whatever your approach to life is, I think it goes without saying that anybody who looks at the way that the world works today is the people up top want all of us divided in a lot of ways. And so the God who wants to divide people is definitely a metaphor here for that. And I think the film in a lot of ways has a nice message at the center of it, that if we come together, we're always going to be better. And I think that that really works when you look at this film. There are moments in this film that ultimately made me feel emotional in moments. There were moments of this film that I thought were absolutely beautiful, not only when it comes down to animation or voice acting, but the music and how it all comes together to create some really beautiful cinematic moments, especially seeing it on an IMAX screen. There were moments of this film that I think really worked. When this movie works, it definitely works. However, I do think it's a film that is a bit of a drop off narratively from that first film, as I just think it's a little too overcluttered with characters that don't ultimately have an abundance to do, and it oftentimes left that middle part of the movie feeling like, where are we really going with this? It didn't really feel like there was as much going on, and by the time we got to the end, it's a film I found myself conflicted on the middle, but I really enjoyed the way that the story started, and I really enjoyed the way that the story ended. There were some great emotional beats in there and some music that brought me back in thinking, ultimately, I'm really positive on this film and find it to be a really solid sequel that doesn't live up to the heights of the original, but is definitely worth your time. And I think if you're a fan of the first Moana film, there's a lot of enjoyment to be had here. This is by no means one of those sequels that comes down the line and ultimately doesn't live up to the first one. Is it as good as the first one? No, but it is still a solid watch. I think there's plenty of fun to be had here, and it is a visual spectacle. I think kids are really going to enjoy this film the same way that they did the first one, and I think fans who are adults who really enjoy the first film are also really going to find plenty to enjoy in this film as well. So that's going to be my thoughts on Moana 2. Definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. Are you planning on checking it out? And if you're watching this review after you've already seen it, did you like it? Did you not like it? Where do you agree with me? Where do you disagree with me? What would you have liked to have seen expanded upon a little bit more? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.